So, Refraction Railway 2, let's talk about it. Now, so far I've done 3 different runs in this game mode. I did so I could experience what it'd be like at different team levels. My first run I used an overpowered team, got 155 turn count, so I decided to run them again and get 125 turn count. Then I used a free-to-play friendly team, namely it's free-to-play as I just don't use paid battle pass IDs. And not every single identity in it is meta. Though honestly, if someone's been playing the game for a while as a free-to-play, I'd expect them to have a closer team to the first. That's just the type of game Limbus is. However, I took this free-to-play friendly team and got to 101 turn count on cycle 4. Yeah, that's right, I didn't finish that run. Not because the team was bad, I mean shit, I had Yisong Spice Brush and Overclocked Rhyme Shake. Project Moon themselves could have gone down and given the enemy Super Serum, a Devil Fruit from One Piece, and goddamn Omniscience, and they still would have got clapped by that combo. Conversely, the Rupture team could have got all of that and they'd still get clapped, Rupture his ass. More on that later though. I just didn't finish that free-to-play run because RR2 is fairly boring. Now, before getting into any criticisms, I do want to say one thing. Overall, I'm really happy it's in the game, even though from what I've mostly seen, people aren't the most happy with Refraction Railway 2. I'm just glad we have some content to play. Just having the option of content that isn't either Luxcavation, Mirror Dungeons, or writing Sinclair and Damien fanfic makes me happy. It's just something to do, which is Limbus Company's biggest flaw. There ain't much to do. And with that being said, I find criticism should still be given out for the game mode, so Refraction Railway 3 can be even better than the second. So let's talk about the biggest criticism, the 29 total fights. Yep, when you take into account all the cycle resets, you end up having to fight 29 battles in total. And I know what you're thinking. Yep, it gets repetitive quickly. I'd imagine this choice was made so we'd have more content to play, kinda like how events got a shit ton of grind behind them as a band-aid solution for giving players something to play. But I think they went too hard on the number of resets. At first, the resets were kinda going hard. It was nice to see how much my understanding of the fights improved and the optimizations that came with that. However, since I have done these so that no one shall cry fight about 12 times in total, I can safely say this, wood gives me PTSD. I would have liked to see the number of cycles be reduced, though that would take away from one aspect I really liked of Refraction Railway 2, the buffs. The ability to select buffs that benefit your particular team is great. It opens up the ability to use different team builds. I mean, it won't stop the Unga Bunga meta units from just tearing ass, but it can help off-meta teams be more viable, or causing some insane bullshit like killing the Centipede in 2 turns via Gloom and Sinking buffs. So that aspect is amazing. It causes an environment where players can feel confident in bringing in the teams they want to use, and it makes RR have some replay value. For example, you can try to bleed team and choose all the perfect identities for it, gaining all the necessary buffs and seeing how they then are absolutely worthless. So you drop them and instead pick up a sinking team. And yes, this is just a joke. You cannot actually make a bleed team in Limbus, it's a fictional fairy tale. So the buffs are a great addition, but my problem is with just how repetitive the fights get. I appreciate getting 5 buffs. I don't appreciate redoing the same fights over and over. In small amounts it would be fine, but this is not in a small amount. I mean, sweet Christ, 29! I'ma remember that number till the day I die. If instead we had different bosses per cycle, I think that'd be amazing. So for cycle 1 we need to fight the Wood, the Fox, and the Asshole, but for cycle 2 we can fight the Fairy Gentleman, the Fey Lantern, etc. Now I don't mean this in a way to where those fights are randomized. So whenever you start a new cycle, these selected fights are randomly chosen from a predetermined pool of bosses. I mean to say, what if we had 29 unique fights in it? Now, I wouldn't actually like to see 29 unique fights, that would be excessive, but the idea of having the cycle system span across maybe 18-ish unique fights is something that interests me. As the main problem isn't that we need to do 29 fights, it's that we need to do 20 repeated fights. I'm not against having some repeat fights, especially when they can change in between cycles, like the Fairy Gentleman, but when my 7th battle of the first boss is the same as my first time fighting it, yeah, it gets old. So to recap, the buffing system is great, but in my opinion, since it is tied to us repeating fights ad nauseum, I feel like it could be implemented better. If RR1 had that same system to where you could get a buff after, let's say, the 2nd fight, then the 5th, etc., it would have made line 1 much more replayable. It would have been a great improvement. And that replayability does come from one other aspect. The time it takes for a Refraction Railway 1 full run is much shorter than a Refraction Railway 2 run. And that increase in length makes it harder for me to want to fuck around in it. Like, I could take in this squad, the flower power one, nothing but females in it, to mess around in RR2. But since I know how long it'll take to get to Cycle 5, then beat the boss, it really dissuades me from wanting to mess around in it. It's like if my friend walked up to me and said they did a full new run in Red Dead Redemption 2, where the key difference is they only use pistols in the game. I would call them a fucking maniac. That shit is like an 80-hour long game. So to redo all of that for a slight change isn't the most enjoyable use of your time, which is why I don't feel that much of a want to replay RR2. That run is just going to be long as hell. Why do I want to spend all that time at a run to just try out a slightly different team? And yes, I'd do the full run. The main goal of RR is to see the turn count go as low as possible. I'd have no reason to do a half-baked run then fight the boss at cycle count 3. If RR3 is 1 hour to beat, then we would see a lot more people mess around with new teams in it, to experiment. But if it's 5 hours to beat, then a ton more people would be dissuaded from pulling in dumb meme teams. And I'm not saying I want RR3 to be a 1 hour long run. I'm just throwing out a number for argument's sake. However long people want it to be is going to change per person. I'm just saying that the longer the length per run, the less desire I will have to do multiple runs. But that's only one of 3 reasons I'd say I don't want to replay this RR4. Another one is, as I've said, the 20 repeated fights. There comes a point where I just don't want to fight the same bitch for the 14th time. I already fought and lost the battle of being gay 14 times over. You think I want to redo that experience in Limbus? And the third reason, the biggest one, is the fights in Line 2 are not centered on being good fights. They are centered on increasing your turn count. Now, I would say I like most of the fights in RR2, Fey Lantern and Centipede excluded, but so many of them have mechanics where you just need to burst down the enemy or your turn count increases. Steam Transfer Machine, you gotta kill them in the same turn you break the body or you are in for an infinite Tsukiyomi of dealing free-to-play damage numbers. The Fox, you gotta burst it when its protection is down, unless you like hitting up with 60% of your damage gone. The T-Corp bastards gotta be killed or panicked at low HP to prevent them from actually using the revival mechanic. Fate Lantern really does not need any explanation as to the turn count increasing bullshit behind it. Centipede can be bursted down before it gets an absurd amount of self-charge in the later turn counts. The Fairy Duo doesn't fully got one? I'd say it's debatable, but I'll go with no. The Lost Passenger can be prevented from going into the Bussy dimension via staggering both of its arms. If you don't, be prepared for another turn to be added. And Rose Jesus should be killed before summoning its 7 little Undertale references more than once as he just distract your damage. Which means, 7 out of 9 fights have some mechanic where you need to deal a ton of damage or your turn count will be artificially increased. Steam Transfer Machine being the most obvious one there. It doesn't feel like I'm battling against engaging bosses, I feel like I'm battling against my turn count, which doesn't make the fights fun. And if they ain't fun, then I don't want to play them. And I especially don't want to throw a shit ton of resources away just so I could build up a Rupture team that is dog shit to then go into Line 2 and be disappointed. Oh wait, I did that. Now okay, let's talk about how Line 2 is when you build a dogshit team based around the lie that Rupture exists in this game. So, a little while ago, I streamed up RR2 with this squad, and I truly found out that Sinclair's really only got one usable identity in the game. Like, red shit Sinclair's first skill is 10 power total, second is 13, and third is 17. At up tie 4. So, in other words, our Corp Ishmael's first skill is stronger than 5 of that femboy's skills. Yeah, he's barely usable. And at up tie 3, LCCB Ishmael's strongest skill is 13. These units can be used for a complete run, but I wasn't about to do that shit whilst paying half attention to the game. Though using Utter Despair materialized into identities did show that RR2 is difficult when you are not prepared. But if you are, then fuck is it easy, that shit is free as hell. I'd say base Mirror Dungeon 2 hard mode was more difficult. A lot of difficulty in RR comes from resetting bullshit RNG. And on that note, I do like the idea of locking in speed and skill so players just don't constantly reset. But since speed values will still be randomized on turn 2, people still got incentive to reset, to maximize damage. Like using quick suppression at the start of the turn for the fragile, or using the right damage type with the first skills to stagger the boss so then all later burst skills are optimized regardless of typing. I feel like making it so people don't spam reset for good RNG and RR will probably just be a never-ending battle. And if we did get to the point where 10 plus turns were set in stone the second you clicked on the battle, I would probably get annoyed at bad RNG just making it so that run will forever be ass, with no way for me to get at least neutral RNG. And for the type of gameplay RR is, I really cannot see people ignoring the reset button. It's all about optimizing damage, which has some very obvious drawbacks, like the criticism that existed ever since Line 1. Tank IDs are worthless. Anything that cannot deal high damage numbers will immediately be forgotten by this game mode. It's how it was made. But I don't think that's too bad, as tank IDs can still thrive in the game, like using them in Mirror Dungeon 2 hard mode. So if we get more game modes that aren't about killing things as fast as you can, then tanks will have a different spotlight they can shine in. And speaking of possible shit in the future, there is one fairly minor thing I'd like to see RR do. That is, make a leaderboard. It'd be raw as hell for a leaderboard to exist to show who has the best score. I know we got the score displayed on the banner, but deadass, who sees that? I sure as sugar don't. I only open up that menu to add new friend requests, then I immediately close it. I have never looked for the lowest turn count banner on my friends list. I don't know, that could just be a me thing. Still though, having a leaderboard to see the top 100 or so people would be really nice. It'd give more incentive to grind low turn counts. Now, let's talk about the positives of RR2. As I said prior, more content and the buff system is nice. Another thing would be how solo runs are no longer viable. There was a bit of interest in watching them, though it's goofy as fuck to have a near optimal team either missing one member or having one walk in like fucking Kagurabachi. And deadass, it gave rise to one of the funniest moments of this game, watching Spice Brush Yi-Song dodge for 3 turns in a row, then one-shotting the wooden sex doll. That shit was godlike, and that video alone was enough to make me happy as hell with the change. Another good aspect is the total amount of new fights we got. Line 1 had 3 unique ones, technically 5, but I don't count K-Corp as a fight because it just isn't the most mechanically interesting. And this one has 4, I also don't count T-Corp for the same reasons. And I know having one more unique fight ain't the most, but 2 things. 1. Line 1 had 4 more battles in total, which meant we saw on average a lot more familiar faces. 2. There aren't as many dead fights in Line 2. Like, okay, who the hell was excited to fight these bitches in RR1? Bro, I don't even remember what they're called. That's how forgettable they are. I ain't even looking up their name. They don't deserve it. The mariachis get a pass, so they're based. But who can forget the amazing time when we fought the telephone fox, then the shark, then we had to fight both of them again, at the same time. I ain't insane about Line 2's fights, but I'd say overall they were better than Line 1. They're just way more mechanically interesting. Though Line 2 did cook up one amazing ass thing. That is, it gave us motivated Sinclair. This is what happens when Sinclair gets told how much Damien wants to Know what? I don't think I can detail much more. Y'all gonna have to jump over to my Wattpad to get the full details. Though yeah, this bug is amazing. I ain't mad they got rid of it, I'm just overjoyed that it existed. It easily gave me the most fun I've had yet in Line 2. However, I'd still say Line 1 was more fun overall. Bug excluded, I mean come on, yeah. Reason is cause I didn't have to repeat as many boss fights. So when it comes to Line 2, I like how they tried to change it. I prefer Project Moon experimenting with new shit as opposed to rehashing the same experience. With that being said, the fights are annoying, replaying them is too, but they are overall more mechanically interesting than Line 1's fights. Though the length makes me dread doing a full run. And Rupture is more dead than my hopes and dreams. However, I'm still glad with Line 2. It's more content and I was genuinely enjoying my first run. Not as much the further I got into it, but I was still happy with what I played. Which is why I feel that if they keep the good of this line, namely the buff system, and throw away all the negatives, then Line 3 will absolutely cook. That shit will be fire, but nowhere near as fire as this 5-page Sinclair Yaoi fanfic I just finished writing. Yeah, boy's like a modern day Shakespeare but for gay porn.